bring in John McMullen. We've done a lot of NFL talk today. We'll go through the news and notes. We'll go through the games. A lot of news has happened since the last time John was on, which was 24 hours from this moment right now. And he joins us now on the Sports Bash. We told you the other day, John, we had so many more things to ask, but we ran out of time. That's the NFL. And since then, the list has gotten longer. There is more NFL news, including one of which all the head coaching vacancies are now finalized, as we now know, John, that Anthony Lynn, it's funny, we just talked about how he was kind of off the radar. He reemerges. This guy's last 4 months have been unbelievable. He was a running backs coach, then an offensive coordinator, then an interim head coach, and now he's a head coach of a new team, Anthony Lynn in Los Angeles.
Yeah, it wasn't looking good there for a moment for him. And as I said, Anthony Lynn had 5 interviews of the 6 openings, which we still have San Francisco. I'm out unless something happened that I don't know.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Nope, you're right about that. I misspoke.
Yeah, but it was looking bad for a guy who everybody wanted to talk to, and all of a sudden he gets the Chargers job. And you're right. I mean, it's been a meteoric rise for him in one calendar year. But I guess if you look at Sean McVay and somebody like that who was playing wide receiver at Miami of Ohio as late as 2007, is now an NFL head coach. That's just the way this industry is going. People want the young ascending head coaches, and we've seen it all throughout this process, this hiring cycle.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's funny because you go from it almost seems like, and I'm not saying Anthony Lynn's not qualified or doesn't have the credentials, but an obscure running back coach to offensive coordinator to interim head coach to head coach of a franchise in 4 months' time seems like a pretty fast rise to the top.
Oh, there's no question. You hit the nail on the head. I mean, he starts out as assistant head coach, running backs coach, so he's a little bit more sort of thought highly than the average running backs coach. But obviously Greg Roman gets fired by Rex Ryan, and then ironically Rex Ryan gets fired a week early, and all of a sudden he's a head coach, and it looked as Buffalo, that was their first plan, and then all of a sudden Sean McDermott gets there and wows them. And it looked like maybe he was waiting around and didn't seize his opportunity, but he's in a much better situation, at least talent-wise. Obviously, it's difficult with the Chargers moving, playing in the Hub Center, which is only 30,000 people. It's really an MLS stadium. All that is going to be difficult to deal with, but there's a lot of talent on that team, starting at the quarterback position in Phillip Rivers, and he's known for really exotic running schemes. That's what he's famous for. Buffalo was number 1 in running in the NFL, so it's going to bode well for Melvin Gordon, who had a breakout year. And then you think about Joey Bosa. He's going to be a superstar in this league. I mean, he was spectacular after the holdout, which was bizarre. And then there were the injuries. People forget Keenan Allen. He's a real number 1 receiver in this league. And they have Jason Barrett, who's going to be a lockdown corner who was injured. So there's a lot of talent on that team at key positions. So he's got a real chance to get them going in the right direction real quickly.
Yeah, so interesting hire there. Another interesting, I think this story is kind of interesting. We talk about the rise of Lynn. How about the irony here? We touched on it a little bit yesterday, but you tweeted something out that I don't know that Eagles fans or NFL fans are really aware of in terms of Sean McDermott gets hired in Buffalo. Okay, follow us now. Sean McDermott was the defensive coordinator in Philly. He was fired. He was replaced by Juan Castillo. Yesterday, we told you, Juan Castillo now is the new offensive line coach, so he rejoins McDermott. They then grab another Andy Reid disciple to finish out the the defensive coordinator spot there, Leslie Frazier, and the Reid coaching tree just continues to branch out, John.
Yeah, I mean, Andy's really well respected around this league, and his sort of recommendation, his stamp carries a lot of weight No pun intended there for people who want to take shots at Andy, but he is just, and I don't think people in Philadelphia realize just how good it was and how good that program was. And you look at all the people on the Reed coaching tree now, I think we're at 8 that have had head coaching jobs around this league. And you think about, there's 32 teams. You don't have to be a math genius to figure out that's 25% of the league. That's how well respected this organization, this coaching staff was under Andy Reid when it was here, and so many guys have gone through it and graduated. And you see, you mentioned, we talked about a little bit about Juan Castillo yesterday, and everyone says, and that was probably Andy's biggest mistake as far as coaching, trying to make him the defensive coordinator. But he has always been a good offensive line coach. And you guys mentioned you lost track of him. He got a job right away, and he got a job with John Harbaugh. And it was John Harbaugh is obviously an Andy Reid guy. And they have tremendous respect for each other. And coaching is all about relationships. And you see it with Sean McDermott. What does he go to? He goes to Juan Castillo. He goes to Leslie Frazier. All people they know that have been under Andy Reid, that they know that can do the job, and they have a ton of respect for it.
Hey, I do, before we jump into the games, there's a couple other quick notes. I don't know how much stock you put into this NBC Indianapolis, but Bob Kravitz is a pretty respected guy, and he says he believes the Colts reached out to John Gruden about coaching the team. And many people believe that if there was the right quarterback in place, and we've heard Gruden gush about luck enough, do you think there's anything to that, belief?
John gets mentioned with every coaching opening.
He does, and many of them you just got to roll your eyes at. But Andrew Luck, he has said the quarterback, the right situation at quarterback. He has said, I won't return unless it's the right situation at quarterback. Does this qualify?
Well, it would. Everyone in this league loves Andrew Luck. I wouldn't say, because John gushes about everybody except Brock Osweiler, the quarterback. So what he says on television doesn't necessarily mean all that much. But, yeah, behind the scenes, I'm sure he thinks, like everybody else, very highly of Andrew Luck. And people are wondering, news broke last week that Jim Irsay was going to stick with the status quo, and Ryan Grigson and Chuck Pagano. And because he hasn't come out and said it and issued the press release and confirmed it, people are wondering what's going on. So I think the speculation comes from that. And I've always been – people want concrete answers. And hey, when you're talking about the guy who has the decision-making ability, and obviously the owner does, of any particular team, he can give all the votes of confidence in the world, but if he finds something he likes better, then he can change his mind. So it doesn't matter. And I think the meteor part of that report that you mentioned is Peyton Manning. And I think there is smoke to that fire, in that they want to create sort of a John Elway situation in Denver. And maybe if Peyton Manning comes in to run football operations, then everything's open and on the table. And that includes the head coach. And who knows, maybe John Gruden will come out of the booth, but we've heard it so many times, that part of it's hard to believe.
John McMullen with us here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN, as we will get into these games, the playoff games this weekend. And I just wanted to know if you saw a stat. I threw this out to Josh and Mike a segment or two ago about that Tom Brady, this is a great stat too, that Tom Brady could throw an interception on each of his next 35 passes, and he would still have a higher passer rating than Brock Osweiler. That's per NFL research.
Poor Brock. It's piling on. Well, look, nobody's comparable. There's a very short. You're talking about guys like Montana and Manning, who we just mentioned. Very few people who have ever played this game belong in the conversation with Tom Brady. and Brock Osweiler is certainly not one of them. And as you head to the divisional round of the playoffs, that looks like certainly the biggest mismatch of the weekend. And if Houston is going to be competitive, it's going to come from the defensive side of the ball. I mean, they're just not good enough offensively, but that's the number one ranked defense in the NFL. So if they are going to shock the world or even stay close in that game, it's going to have to be Jadeveon Clowney and Whitney Merciless and Brian Cushing and the corners and everybody else. It's not going to be Brock Osweiler outplaying Tom Brady. I think we all understand that.
Let's get your take. First off, the fact that the game is being moved Sunday. We're going to have Pittsburgh, Kansas City, originally 1 o'clock. That game has now been moved to an 8:15 start time. Public safety, the reason they're giving out there.
Yeah, I mean, it's legitimate. Josh asked me if they moved it for ratings purposes. I don't think so, because they could have done that anyway. They could have set up the schedule and had a primetime game. They've always done it this way and had the late starts on Saturday and then 1 and 4 on Sunday. There is a significant storm set for the Kansas City area, and the weather is supposed to get better as the day moves on. And this is just where we are in society. We remember that Eagles game that was moved back to, what was it, a Tuesday with the snowstorm.
Yeah, against the
Vikings. These things wouldn't have happened.
I was at that game, by the way.
In the 1970s and 80s, but they happen now, and it's probably a good thing. I mean, you want to keep as many people safe as possible.
So let's look at some of the matchups then and get your take on them. I guess let's start with Houston and New England, because I don't know. I haven't met anybody anyway that can give me a reason or has even cared to give a reason why Houston has a shot in this game.
No, they don't. I mean, they're a 2-touchdown underdog for a reason, and they probably wouldn't even be in this game if Derek Carr didn't get hurt. And nobody knows that better than Bill O'Brien, who used to be a Bill Belichick assistant for 5 years. He knows what he's in for. Vince Wilfork, who's the Texans' nose tackle, was an 11-year Patriot. He knows what he's in for. Mike Vrabel, an assistant, he knows what he's in for. But if you're looking to hang your hat on something, as I said, it's got to be that defense. That defense is really, really good. And it almost has to be better from the Texans' standpoint than people think it's going to be, because people think they're going to get rolled 35-0. And if they stay closer than that, it's probably a moral victory.
I would agree. It's a 15.5 point spread in that game, so you got blowout written all over it. Because in the playoff, I don't think this game's 15.5 points if it's a regular season game, right?
Yeah, it probably is. That's how much respect people have for the Patriots, and obviously in Foxborough, it's that much more. And the Texans just aren't good enough offensively, and it starts at the quarterback position. And by the way, when we talk about, I'll still say it, when we talk about the job openings and coaching, keep an eye on Houston after they lose, because Bill O'Brien is not happy if Brock Osweiler is going to be forced on him again for the 2017 season.
That would be very interesting. And obviously, Bill O'Brien, we talked about it last week, not thrilled with the situation out there as well. All right, the other Saturday game is the early one. That is Seattle and Atlanta. Really interesting. Look, Rawls got going last week. They don't have Earl Thomas. You're going up against a breakout, historic offense with Matt Ryan and Julio Jones and Freeman and this running attack here. They played once. Seattle won that game. There was some controversy. So there's a lot of storylines surrounding Quinn against his former team, the defensive coordinator in Seattle. He's now the head coach in Atlanta. So there's a lot going on between Atlanta and Seattle.
Yeah, there is. And Seattle has not been good, by and large, on the road this season, and I think that's the difference in this game. If they are going to upset the Falcons, I think it's got to be a carbon copy of last week. I think you got to get that running game going. You got to have Thomas Rawls up at 140, 150, 160 again. And if you do that, you're probably doing what the Cowboys want to do. Same type of thing. You want to keep Matt Ryan off the field. And if you can get a running game going and shorten things and keep that explosive Falcons offense off the field, you probably have a chance. If it turns into a shootout, I don't like Seattle's odds much at all. And I do expect the Atlanta Falcons to win the game.
Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN. All right, let's go to the Sunday games, and we'll start with the early game now, which is Dallas and Green Bay. That has turned into the new early game because of the movement of the other game. But there's a lot in this one. First off, Jordy Nelson ruled out. He will not be able to play. Some people said, well, if he can go Saturday, multiple fractures, probably wouldn't be able to play next week. He'll be reevaluated next week, but even if they make it, he might not be able to go. So, when you look at Green Bay, they're going on the road. They played once before, right? These two teams have already met one time, and Dallas kind of dominated that game. When you remember back to that October 16th meeting, Elliott really had a big game. Green Bay's defense at the time had the number one rush defense in the league, and they just ran all over them. Do you anticipate a different style of game this time around?
Yeah, I do, because Green Bay is a completely different team. They're the hottest team in the NFL. They've won 7 straight. Aaron Rodgers has been unbelievable over that span. 19 touchdown passes, no interceptions. That's how well he is playing. And really, if Jordy Nelson didn't get hurt last week, I would be saying the Packers are going to win and win kind of easily. That's how things have shifted for me. That makes things a bit easier for the Cowboys. I still look at it, though, and I don't start the conversation with how are the Packers going to deal with the number one seed in the NFC. I start the conversation with how in the world did the Dallas Cowboys stop Aaron Rodgers the way he's playing? And my answer is I have no idea. When this playoff scenario first was set, and I looked at the landscape, and I said Green Bay is going to win, and it's going to be Dallas is going to be out, and I still think that. I think the Green Bay Packers are a better team right now, the better quarterback, and they're going to win that football game.
John, you talked about Ezekiel Elliott and what he did in the first matchup, 28 carries, 157 yards. Can the Packers slow down Elliott this time, though?
Well, the Packers' defense is not good. I mean, that's one of the well-kept secrets in the NFL. For some reason, whether it's Dom Capers' reputation, Clay Matthews' reputation, things like that, Julius Peppers, it hasn't been good. It's especially bad in the secondary, but Dallas really doesn't like to throw the ball all over the lot, and that's really the big deficiency for the Green Bay defense. However, Ezekiel Elliott belongs in the MVP conversation because everything about the Dallas Cowboys goes back to him. Their defense, people talk about it. They talk about the stats and saying it's better than they thought it was, and it is, but that's because Ezekiel Elliott keeps them off the field. And Dak Prescott's had a great season. That's because he's looking at 8-man boxes that are trying to stop the running back, and that makes it easier. So if the Cowboys are going to win this game, it's going to be because of Ezekiel Elliott, and it is going to be a 150, 160-yard rushing performance.
Is the extra time off for the rookies, Dak Prescott, Ezekiel Elliott, and all that anticipation, is that a good thing for Dallas, that extra time, or does that hurt them?
I think that tends to be depending on the player, and you never really know until they do it. I would say it's more susceptible to hurting the quarterback than the running back, and we'll see. But, again, Dak Prescott's not going to have to worry about great corners out there or a secondary that's going to be able to dominate him. That's the weakness of the Green Bay Packers. My whole thing with that game is I can't imagine the way Rodgers is playing Green Bay scoring less than 23 or 24 points. So it starts at 25. Can you get to 25? And I don't know if the Cowboys can get to 25 with Dak Prescott playing quarterback.
Okay, we'll get John's picks in just a second, but we'll break down the last one now. Pittsburgh plays Kansas City. A lot of storylines in this one as well. Obviously, Andy off the bye. You've got the Pittsburgh 3Bs. You've certainly got the injury to Johnson on the defensive side of the ball for Kansas City. So there's a whole bunch to kind of chew on in this one here. Big Ben getting older. How many more chances at this run does he get? Throw it all into the pot and circle that one up for us.
Yeah, I think it's the best matchup of the weekend. I think it's two evenly matched teams, although they go about it in different ways. Pittsburgh is so explosive offensively. Kansas City is just so well coached and well prepared. And certainly when Pete asked about the extra week for Dallas, and I don't know if it's going to be a positive or a negative. I know it's going to be a positive for Kansas City. Andy Reid is generally lights out as far as game plans when he has extra time to prepare. I don't think the weather is going to affect either team all that much because they're both used to it. So this is really the most compelling matchup to me over the weekend, and it comes down to what style of game. If Kansas City can't stop Pittsburgh, they're in deep, deep trouble because they're not going to be able to win a shootout. If they're able to get the pass rush going and keep it in that 17 to 24 range, I think Kansas City wins the game. And anytime you have a matchup that looks so close on paper, you should and tend to lead towards the home team, and that's what I do with the Kansas City Chiefs.
All right, let's get your official picks locked in. Atlanta, Seattle. You have?
I have Atlanta.
ATL, New England. All right, New England.
Yeah.
Green Bay, Pittsburgh. Green Bay, Dallas.
The Packers.
You're going with the Pack, and then Pittsburgh, Kansas City.
And then I'm going with Kansas City. Probably in a 1-2 point game. It's going to be that razor thin of the margin and that close.
There you go. The official picks from John: Atlanta, New England, Green Bay, Kansas City. That's John McMullen at JF McMullen on Twitter. Of course, check out all his national NFL coverage at FanRag NFL. And, of course, you can check out any Eagles news and notes that will happen on our website, 973ESPN.com. Eagles been a little quiet, although they did bring another wide receiver coach in for what's that, Al Gross' son?
Yeah, Al Gross' son. So that's along with Love. They're bringing in two receivers coach. Deuce Staley, the offensive coordinator at the East-West Shrine game. That's a little note. So it's the first year the NFL is providing assistance for that college all-star game, and the Eagles are going to get a close look because Deuce is going to be running the offense of the East team.
Very interesting.
See the headlines now, helping the receivers grow.
Deuce is loose. Right? There we go. All right, John, enjoy the games. We'll talk to you Monday, pal.
Hey, thanks, guys.